All right. So 16. What is 16? Let me look up the official name of 16 real quick.
It's the allows diversity as a factor in public employment, education, and contracting decisions.
Yeah, so
Legislative constitutional amendment, period.
that certainly tells you what it is.
Period.
All right. So Proposition 16 on the ballot this year is effectively a repeal of Proposition 209 from 1996. And for all intents and purposes, what it does, well, it actually does this, is it brings back affirmative action. So really what this discussion is going to be about is ultimately affirmative action. That's kind of what's on the concept, and that's what's on the ballot. So again, before we get into it, my bias is here. I've
been looking forward to this segment.
This is going to be a freaking.
I want to hear your biases.
This is going to be a freaking minefield. Okay, so affirmative action. My bias is here, or my perspective is that I believe that the data supports that systemic racism exists. It's a thing. It's real. I'm sorry, not systemic racism.
Question.
What's that? Yeah.
Just question. So you're saying your bias is that you pay attention to facts?
Yes. That's
okay. So I just wanted to clarify for our audience. Just want to make sure that's his bias. He believes in facts.
It's simply that. Yeah. I mean, that's. I shouldn't have to say that, right? But like.
Well, that's not. I mean, in my mind, that's not a bias.
Well, do you know how many times I've heard that stupid line that they always pull out, and I'm not even going to talk about who they are, because they are just this amorphous white blob of entitled bullshit.
Constantly interrupting people on a radio stream.
Yeah. Just kidding. Fuck them. Interrupt them. I don't know. They say something. Who's they? They are people.
There's a line that you keep repeating.
Their name is Chad. Oh, I hear it a lot, that there's no single demographic more discriminated against in America today than a white male.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Except white male is not a demographic.
Yeah.
White male is a catch-all, but that's. Anyway, we could discuss that.
I'm the real victim.
Yeah.
Pointing out racism is racist.
Reverse racism, right? That's my favorite one. No, there's no reverse racism. There's just racism.
Right. So let's have a quick discussion on what institutional racism, which is what I meant to say instead of systemic racism, which really is the same thing. But I wanted to be clear. Institutional racism is racism baked in to
it's institutionalized
to the system.
Yeah.
It's baked in the cake.
It's baked in the cake. Yes, it's baked in the cake of government, right? And it's
or the private sector.
It's baked in that Jews will not replace us cake.
Yeah. It's systemic in that.
That's a nod to Borat. That's not. I'm not making that comment.
Yes.
Just want to clarify for our.
Watch the second Borat movie, or as he calls it, the subsequent Borat movie, which I thought was
subsequent movie film.
Anyway,
for delivery of prestigious gift,
prestigious bribe, yeah, something like that.
Oh,
anyway, sorry. God. I'm gonna have to fix this in post.
Yep. Okay. So.
just kidding. I'm not gonna fix it. Who am I kidding?
Institutional racism colors all things. government, right? It effectively gets in the way of the 14th Amendment, the equal protection clauses of the 14th Amendment that says, in this country, we're all supposed to be treated and seen as equal under the law. And that is clearly not the case according to the data. I mean, you can look at the data and it's plain as day that is not the case. So that's institutional racism in a nutshell. I probably didn't do it justice. It's a deep subject, but I absolutely believe that exists. The data says it, and so that's my position on, or that's my
Your bias.
perspective. Yeah, my bias towards when I'm thinking about Proposition
That's your
16.
understanding of the situation before researching the proposition.
That's
Is that
right.
what you mean by bias?
That's exactly what I mean.
Okay.
Okay, so affirmative action. What that means in California. Okay, so how do we discuss this? So affirmative action falls out of the what the hell's it called? Let me look it up. Look at my notes here. Right. So affirmative action effectively falls out of the Civil Rights Act, 1964. Right. And that ultimately ends up as a bunch of court cases. The big one being a Supreme Court case called Grutter v. Bullinger. And in that case, they heard an argument for student admission into school based on underrepresented minority groups.
Mm-hmm.
And that court case effectively upheld the action of affirmative action, as long as it's not the only criteria for determining whether somebody is admitted to the school. Right. Sorry. So I did find one interesting thing when I was researching this in the opinion, which was written by Justice O'Connor. She writes, let's see, what is it?
That was the majority opinion.
This was the majority opinion, yes. Quote, it's, the Constitution does not prohibit the law, schools' narrowly tailored use of race in admissions decisions to further a compelling interest in obtaining the educational benefits that flow from a diverse student body. And later on, which was interesting, she said, the court expects, that the race-based admissions policies must be limited in time, although that was an opinion not shared by Ginsburg and Breyer. But she said that, O'Connor said that the court expects that 25 years from now, the use of racial preferences will no longer be necessary to further the interest approved today. And it's
interesting.
It's kind of interesting. And so to put that into context, this case was in 2003. So by that time, California had already repealed or I'm sorry, not repealed, but California had already
Prohibited.
amended their constitution, the California Constitution, to prohibit affirmative action. So we didn't actually get that chance, right? So we didn't get that 25 years because California, along with a few other states, prohibits affirmative action based on at least 2 states I know of that are constitutional amendments to the state. Okay, so, God, where do you even start with this? Affirmative action.
Well, let me ask a question, maybe, if that's okay.
Please.
So, as a starting point, kind of what is the problem that we're trying to solve with it, right? So the problem we're trying to solve is historically certain ethnic groups or certain groups of people, right, have been underrepresented in admissions to states, universities, have been underrepresented in state workforce, have been underrepresented in contracting, right? State public contracting.
That's right.
Right, and that's what this is particularly, right? This isn't necessarily a solve systemic racism, right, or even solve institutional racism, but it's trying to give these historically disadvantaged groups a more level playing field, right? So it's not really trying to necessarily give, just say, okay, everybody I'm hiring for the next 5 years is going to be, a minority or whatever. It's trying to give these historically disadvantaged groups a little bit more of a fair shot, if you will.
Right.
Because we know that systemic racism has long-term impacts on these groups.
Yeah.
And it's not just a point in time.
That's right. It's interesting too, right? So what they're doing is saying the Constitution, 14th Amendment, provides equal protection under the law to every citizen, and they're saying, well, the data doesn't pan out that that's the case. There are these groups that are not being equally protected, and that shows itself as underrepresentation in various things, the things that you just described. And so to get us back in line with this constitutional requirement, we're going to do this affirmative action thing to try and skew the numbers, skew the data such that we move towards the ideal of the 14th Amendment. Now, the interesting bit is that the people who pushed for Prop 209 back in the day, back in 1996, they effectively made their case on the 14th Amendment as well, because they were saying, well, affirmative action codifies unequal treatment. And as such, it's against the Constitution. It's an interesting perspective in that, like, one's approaching it from purely a logical case, right? I mean, if we assume that there's no other reason for them to be making this case, which is not clear at all. They're why Proposition 209 came about is interesting reading and probably outside the scope of this discussion. But if we assume that they have no other reasons, that it's purely a straight law argument, then they're sort of arguing from this purely like conceptual point of view. Like,
Well, I think they're arguing from a purely legal
Yeah,
standpoint, right?
exactly, right? So not the law as it's applied, but just the law, right? And the other side is arguing and saying, well, when you actually when the rubber meets the road and you apply the law to people, this this inequity falls out of that, and so because of that, we need some sort of feedback into the system to try and skew things back to equality. And so it's interesting that you have the two sides using the 14th Amendment to make their cases for exactly the same reason. And who's right? Well, I mean, if you throw out all the other reasons and just purely like look at it from a legal perspective, I don't know. I don't. I think they both make a reasonable case. But at the end of the day, the law exists for the benefit of people. Like the law is not just a thing in and of itself. It serves the people. And so if it's not serving the people as intended, then you absolutely have to make adjustments. And that's ultimately where I came down. So I ultimately decided, because I voted already, but so I decided to vote yes on this. And I saw some flaws with it. There's some issues I have with doing it, in that like it could absolutely backfire. And you do this thing because you're trying to fix a problem, but you can cause all these unintended consequences. And are the unintended consequences more dangerous for society than the actual thing? And by that I mean further driving a wedge between people, right? That's the unintended consequence that could fall out of this, because you
or maybe an intended consequence on the other way too. Who knows?
What I don't know. You think?
Well, I mean, on the other side of the argument, I should say,
Uh-huh.
That stuff like this can drive a wedge between people, and maybe for some groups of people that isn't that horrible of a thing.
Ah, I see. Yeah,
I'm not like accusing anyone of that, but I'm just saying.
It's very possible.
It does happen. It does happen.
Absolutely. And, like I said, read into the origins of Prop 209, and you'll find some shady shit that's like, not shady. It's like, is this racist? I don't know. These people kind of seem racist. You can't really ever tell, because you don't know what anybody's actually thinking. But yeah, I think some of these people are racist. So I don't think they were making a good faith argument, or at least all of them were making a good faith argument that, oh well, we're trying to make a 14th Amendment argument. Like, yeah, okay, sure you are.
Well, I mean, you kind of hinted at this point, and I think it's an important one, that there is the text of a law, and then there's the intent of a law,
Sure.
right?
Uh-huh.
And really, laws that we have are essentially codified morality, right? I mean, we take our moral values and we turn them into laws, right?
I suppose.
Well, I mean,
so
I mean, we take okay, maybe not all laws are morality based, but realistically, I mean, why would we make something illegal unless we think that it's bad?
Well, so I would say law is closer to ethics than it is morality, right?
Okay.
So
I can That's fine.
But
I mean, but I guess I'm hinting at a sense of right and wrong,
yeah,
and
yeah,
however we get to that semantically speaking, then that's fine. But I mean, we are making a set of rules based on what we think is right behavior and right action, and what is wrong behavior and wrong action.
hmm
And the ideal of equal protection under the law, I think, is important, right? Because the intent of it was to make sure that people weren't disadvantaged by the law, right?
right, yeah,
Not
exactly.
not to make sure that people were advantaged by the law,
hmm
right? But I mean, there's if you disadvantage, if you think zero sum, if you disadvantage one group, then you advantage another group, right?
Right.
And I think that this is one of those ones that's difficult to wrap your head around. It's difficult even to talk about because it's very fraught, right? There's a lot of negative, things that could come out of the discussion on this one. But I think that the issue with systemic and institutional racism is, it's acknowledging that it exists, is understanding that groups of people have had advantage their entire life, right? So when it comes to, you think of things like university admission, you think of state jobs, state contracts. These are touch points that have a big impact on the remainder of those people's lives, right?
hmm
So it seems like a reasonable place to say, hey, we do need to find a way to make up for this historical disadvantage by trying to, put people in a better spot so that they can then have a better future.
Right.
And that seems like a pretty good thing,
hmm Yeah. So, and that's ultimately where I found myself. That's the discussion I was having with myself and thinking about this. And so I tried to answer, well, okay, so does affirmative action work? And I think it's flawed. There's not a lot of great data, but there is data that absolutely that seems to demonstrate that it does in fact work, or that I shouldn't say that it works. Well, so it works insofar as it looks like it moves to cure the inequity, but does it work to solve institutional racism? That's harder. That's harder to gauge. But just by looking at the numbers in, for instance, pre 96 versus post 96 in terms of student admissions and different racial groups, you definitely saw a decrease in California once Prop 209 came about. And is it pure cause and effect? I don't know. That's a hard thing to gauge, but I personally decided to vote for it because we've got to try something, and it doesn't appear that this is a great solution to the problem, but I don't think you're going to find a great solution to this problem because it's a very cultural problem to begin with, and so dealing with these ingrained cultural problems is a long road, regardless of what you do.
Yeah. Well, you look back at American history and you see that these cultural problems eventually became, legal issues, right?
Sure.
I mean, we look at the right of women to vote. We look at the Civil Rights Act. A lot of these different,
Right.
A lot of the progress we've made has been legal.
Yeah,
right.
But I think you can't necessarily make the argument that okay, so the U.S. allowed women to vote, suffrage, right? So So did amending the Constitution actually make that happen? Well, I mean, technically, yes. Amending the Constitution did make that happen because it wouldn't have happened without that. But did it's sort of like that's the last thing in a chain of events,
Of course.
right?
Absolutely.
And so there's a bunch of cultural stuff that came before that, and so like that's just the end result. That
But also there's also cultural stuff that comes after it too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yes, there's a lot that leads up to that point
Right.
too, but the act of passing a law like that, or the Civil Rights Act, that also helps
It's a step.
move things forward too.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an important step, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's a step in a group of steps. I agree. And I think I agree a lot. I agree a lot with you on this topic, because we know that it's probably not enough, and we know that maybe it's not the greatest solution, or it's only a piece of a greater package of solutions. But, to me, that's enough to put me over to put my needle over on the yes side, going, hey, we do need to do something.
Yeah.
And yeah, maybe this is not the perfect solution to that problem, but it seems like it's better than doing nothing.
Right. That's effectively where I fell on this.
Yeah.
Another thought experiment not experiment, but thought question I posed to myself was, okay, let's say this does pass, and let's say sometime in the future I'm in a position where I'm in a bid to get a job or access to school or whatever with a disadvantaged minority, someone from a disadvantaged minority. Would I be okay with me not getting that I don't want to say losing that opportunity or whatever, but
losing out.
But yeah,
right?
and ultimately, I think I am, because at the end of the day, like I'm gonna have plenty of opportunity. I mean, yeah, okay, maybe I miss out on that one opportunity in that one case. The reality of the fact is, if you're looking at the numbers before 96 and after 96 in California, there is a change, but it's not like as dramatic as people make it out to be. Like it's not all of a sudden like you're gonna lose out in every opportunity, right? If you're
Right.
a white person or whatever. That's not how it falls out.
Yeah.
And so I think what that means is that yes, we have pushed things to hopefully be just a little bit more equitable, and it's a step in that direction. And I don't know, I kind of agree with Justice O'Connor in this, in that yeah, hopefully sometime in the future it's no longer necessary, right? Because what you're doing is you're making this small change, and then people incorporate that into their worldview, and then over time you've modified culture, and so the law no longer has to force anybody's hand.
I think that's overly optimistic on this issue. Well, because if you look at the history just of the Voting Rights Act, right?
Sure.
And you look at the issues that we're still having, getting people to be able to cast their ballot and being able to do it in a manner that's, commensurate with other people and other groups in other parts of their state or whatever.
That's
you see that there's still a problem. We still have a problem.
That's absolutely
when it comes
a
to
fair
voting
point.
rights.
Yeah.
And I think that, again, that something like this is not going to solve the problem, but I think that it kind of helps make up for a little bit of the existing problem. and helps move things a little bit, move the needle a little bit more.
What
And
what we
that seems to be a good thing, you know?
what we can't do is just put our fingers in our ears and say, this doesn't exist. Nah, 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 nah.
Yes. Yeah. Or even worse, saying that this is exactly what we're talking about when we talk about racism.
Yeah.
You know, and it's unpatriotic to say that there is no race, that there is racism.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, okay. Anyway.
Yeah. So that's effectively where I am on this issue. I don't see it as being really that significant either way. I don't think it's gonna be the terrible thing that the the opposition makes it out to be. But I also think that it's not going to be a great solution to the underlying problem. But I feel it's absolutely a step in a positive direction, and so I voted yes for it.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that you kind of hit on an interesting piece a moment ago when you talked about, well, would I be okay with this if, let's say, I was the top qualified person for this job, somebody had less qualifications or less points in the process then gets it instead of me because they get bonus points, right, for being in a disadvantaged group.
Yeah.
And I think that the issue there is it hints a little bit at, the differences in kind of looking at things from an individualistic perspective versus a collectivist perspective, right?
Sure.
So yes, in that situation, obviously this isn't a great thing for you because, if you're the most qualified, seems like you should get the job, right? But this kind of system that we have basically says that, well, yeah, of course you're going to be most qualified because you're starting with a head start.
Yes,
right?
Exactly.
You're starting with a head start.
Right.
And so, I mean, obviously it's important to go back to the beginning and make sure that people get a more equal start.
Mm-hmm.
But until we can get to that point, this seems like an interim measure, kind of. Maybe that's where the time limiting thing comes in. This seems like an interim measure to help get, a generation or two, have some other points where that maybe they can kind of catch up, if you will.
That's exactly the way I read O'Connor's comment.
Okay.
Is that this is, I mean, we're sort of, like I said about suffrage before. It's like it's all wrapped up together and moving together, culture and the law,
of course,
right? And so we're doing it now, and so hopefully in the future, culture slides sufficiently forward that this is no longer even necessary. The other point I wanted to make too is that it's not affirmative action doesn't make things solely about race. Like, it just says race is now an extra factor. Like, there are so
well, you think like a job interview, right? You think of the different categories of, customer service, technical knowledge, leadership abilities, blah, 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 blah.
Yes,
It's never just one thing.
Right.
Oh, this person has a score of 100 in this category. Well, that's what I'm taking. No, I mean, we balance all the time between technical and social skills and, other pieces of the puzzle. And this would be one piece of that pie, right? One piece of the puzzle.
Yep. And also this as far as I understand it, applies only to things that fall within the purview of government. So
correct.
Only anything that's taking government money or that is in fact itself a government entity is going to fall under this umbrella, which I'm perfectly fine with. I mean, government absolutely should try itself to be as equitable as possible, right? Because I mean,
well, and I think an important point too is that equitable and equal are not always the same thing.
Sure.
So, anyway, I'm with you. I'm voting yes, or I voted yes.
Yeah.
In the past tense.